Hi everyone, David here from DeXe DAO, and this is DAO Talks. We're gonna have a panel today, so I'm very excited for that one. First one so far for us. Stefan, one of the guests, is not here yet, so I'm gonna stall a little bit, trying to give him a bit of extra time, and hopefully something's here so he can join us. We do have two amazing speakers here ready that I'll talk about in a minute, but since we're stalling time, let me introduce the speakers that are here and ask you guys if you have anything interesting, even happening that you want to share. So we have Ben from Gitcoin and Deepa from Impact DAOs, both really awesome. Both have been on the DAO Talks before. So yeah, Ben, Deepa, anything cool, interesting happening with you now?
Feel free to jump in if you want. First, Deepa, I'm happy to ramble on about what's going on with Gitcoin and stuff if you want. But by all means, please jump in if you'd like.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad that you're hosting this talk. I've been saying this about DAOs and meritocracy, or DAOs being run by people who earn the right to vote rather than just buying a token is the way to go. It's the future. The moment I read the Soulbound Tokens paper that was written by Vitalik and two other researchers, I've been like really, I thought that's the future, of people earning their right to vote and not having governance transferable. So I'm glad that we're having this discussion today, because it's not talked too often, this matter. Most DAOs are still running on the past standards. So I'm glad we're having this discussion.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. I've always been a fan of the idea of role-bound tokens instead of soul-bound tokens. And governance in DAOs is a totally fascinating thing and something that I think is definitely ripe for more disruption, more innovation. Having spent a lot of my life working in nonprofits and political parties and elsewhere where we took the idea of decentralization seriously. There's a lot to learn from the legacy world, so to speak, but also a lot of room for improvement in those systems as well. And working day to day at a DAO, definitely shows you the places where there's opportunities for growth and for improvement, and also just kind of how exciting it is to be in the midst of this kind of process with sort of building in public or building the spaceship while we're flying it, or however we describe it. So yeah, +1. I think this is an important topic, and I'm glad we're here to talk about it.
Ben, did I hear you right? Did you say role bound or world bound? Which one?
Role bound. I'm not sure if anybody else uses that terminology, but I've just, for a while thought, that we need to be looking at ways that we can gate access to different levels of decision-making authority based on roles people play within an organization. And it always did strike me as a little bit odd that, we use these, these tokens that are sort of governance tokens that are supposed to be non-monetary, but clearly they have a monetary value, and then you end up in this position where you're choosing between eating dinner or voting on a proposal, basically, and sort of repeating some of the inequalities and sort of realities of the legacy world where, some people have far more resources, therefore have far more votes, and sort of inadvertently kind of reproducing the system of sort of voting with shares in a corporation that, is also just, to me, at least, a vestige of kind of older ways of looking at and how power can be distributed most effectively.
Okay, great. Let's jump right into it. So when you say that there's role bounds, I mean that someone, let's say, comes in and takes on a delegate role or whatever. If they leave the role, they leave the tokens behind. So how's the distribution on that? How's the transference on that, if any? How does it work for that?
I mean, I think we're talking about ideas that are really just being explored by a lot of different, DAOs and other organizations in real time. So I don't have like a perfect answer to this, more of a theoretical one. But, definitely we see it in like Discord roles as kind of one, version of this, where you get different badges and it gives you access to, different places where kind of key decisions are being made and the discussion is happening. To me, that's kind of the most sort of functional, sort of that you can point at version of this that exists. But I know there are other experiments happening in various DAOs where they're using, NFTs that gate access to different votes that are happening on Snapshot or elsewhere. And to me, that's kind of a version of this idea of role-bound tokens. But it definitely, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing where I could sort of point to it and say, this is the optimal way to do this. I'm curious, Deepa, if you've got some more specific examples to point to.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that if we look at how DAOs get started, generally one person floating an idea, or maybe a couple of people coming together and saying, hey, let's do this, together. And then people come and start chiming in because you put your mission out, you put your vision out, and they're attracted to the cause, right? And then, as founders, you want to now, because we are a DAO and we want to decentralize power, what's the most logical way to do it, right? Like, you would want to decentralize with the people who have skin in the game, right? The ones who show up almost, you can have incentive structures drawn out. Like if you put in 16 hours of work or whatever amount of work you put in every month, or, whatever you draw out for your commitment from your contributors, you can start allocating tokens to them, which are tokens that prove that they've been contributing on chain. And then those tokens, can become the tokens that those members can use to govern proposals or the direction of a DAO, right? So I would say, like, if we have to design a DAO from the first principles, and let's forget about how DAOs got started in 2021, because we didn't have the standard at that point of time. The only standard was ERC20 tokens or ERC721, which is like the NFT token, and both of them are transferable, right? So DAOs didn't have this new standard, which exists now since the paper has come out, soul-bound tokens, Autospace, unlock protocol they've been working on, non-transferable tokens. So if we have to design a DAO, today, like, you would definitely want to share power with the people who have skin in the game, rather than anybody who can just buy a token and then, just show up at a door. And obviously the person who's bought a token is not fluent in terms of what's happening at the operational level from day to day. So, the decisions are never made right because that person doesn't have the context. He just has the token to vote. So I believe that the future of DAOs is going to be this, like the new DAOs that are launching and are designing from first principles would think about this way of decentralizing power rather than decentralizing power with launching a financial token. I see Ukraine DAO in the spaces here. I remember tracking Ukraine DAO's story from the very beginning, and they've never launched a financial token. They were Alona, the co-founder. She's been active in the DAO scene in London, and she saw the troubles that come with a financial token. Like, if you have that, then people's incentive to align is all about money. It's all driven from that point of view. And so she was very clear the moment she launched Ukraine DAO that she will never introduce a financial token. And at that point of time, in March or in Feb, I would say, when Ukraine DAO launched, there weren't non-financial tokens at that point of time. But I'm sure, like, if Alona has to revisit, and just recognize her members who've been consistently working with her since that day, it would be just granting a soul-bound token and and having a more on-chain proof of shared governance.
And I don't know, feel free to jump in whenever you want to comment. But yeah, it's interesting concept in terms of, like Deepa said, you want to get people involved and people rewarded who have skin in the game, right? Who are actually involved. And then let's take it further, right? I'm gonna try it at least to be specifically provocative here. Just to make it more fun, but let's explore more, right? So you have people who are involved, you have people who care, you have people who care and get rewarded for it. What's next step? Do you help them make a living off of it, or do you kind of divide the volunteers from the career DAOists, the DAO workers, what are you going to call them? Do you devise some entirely different structure? Since we're recreating companies, right? We're recreating governments, we're creating volunteer organizations, we're creating any sort of organization. What's the kind of roadmap and what's the end game? And these are a lot of different questions in one, so feel free to pick out any part of it. what's the end game for rewarding people, motivating people, incentivizing people in the DAO in such a way that it works for them, it works for the DAO. It's not just something they do for fun or when they have like 5 minutes to spare, but also it's something that really helps move the DAO forward, right? So where everybody gets enough to sustain them, whether financially or motivationally or otherwise.
Yeah, most DAOs, when they begin, like it's launching a startup, right? You don't have funds to begin with. But at the same time, the founders are always very conscious of decentralizing, like, because they're living this decentralized ethos that we don't want to be the central point of authority. And so they're looking for logical ways to decentralize. And, people who are committed or who are, it's a startup, but there are no formal employees, it's contributors, and the ones that who show up every day to help you pursue a cause, you start sharing, the power with them. And that token could also, the token that you grant them, which is a merit-based token, helps build their on-chain reputation as well, something that they can take within the growing DAO ecosystem and say, we've done so-and-so work here, and that helps them unlock, economic opportunities elsewhere in the DAO ecosystem. But as the initial idea grows and you fundraise, obviously you have, because now you have X number of people who are eligible to vote on proposals, and they can put in their own proposals. We want to, do a podcast around this, or we want to, have a guild around this, and they can get endowed from the DAO, from the treasury through that, because these are the people who have skin in the game. They know the direction the DAO should take, and so they have the right, or have the full knowledge to make those proposals and get funded in a more decentralized way, rather than one person calling the shots.
I think that's a really good summary, Deepa. The only thing I would add is, we definitely see different versions of this play out in some bigger DAOs where, there was some sort of a token event that, was reasonably successful because of buy-in to the idea. So, really generated by sort of community support ultimately. But, with some sort of concentration of tokens to founders or to folks that were sort of early on involved in the project. And it's been interesting to see how approaches have been taken to delegation of those tokens, or we've been doing some experiments with using models of quadratic funding or quadratic voting on Snapshot, which is kind of cool to see that they're now integrating tools like that. Definitely not as fully decentralized or bottom up as that approach could be, if you sort of come in from day one with a model like what you described. But in the sort of spectrum of decentralization, or sort of the sort of steps towards decentralization, there's definitely some models out there that people have been trying to, at least spread, and delegate that voting power and sort of limit the influence of whales within the ecosystem. But, I think when you have a voting token that also has a monetary value, there is kind of an implicit kind of built-in problem that goes along with it. Oh, I see your hand up there, Ukraine DAO. I'll stop talking, let you jump in.
Yeah, let me go ahead, jump in.
Hey guys, hey everyone. I missed the beginning of this, the very beginning of the space, but I think I kind of got a grasp of what you've been talking about. And basically, token-based governance is something that can you hear me? Okay, by the way.
Yeah, totally. Hearing the break.
So token-based governance is something that I've seen many communities having issues with, and that is something that Vitalik Buterin has spoken about previously. The problem is that blockchain and the DAOs, the philosophy behind them is it kind of aims to make the world more and decision making as well more decentralized and more fair, right? And so if you have an environment where whoever can buy more tokens has the larger say, then you automatically cause the very same problem that you're trying to solve, right? And I've been actually I dropped in the comments. I'll pin it. one of Vitalik's papers is called DAOs are not corporations, why decentralization in autonomous organizations matters. And it's a paper that he wrote shortly after he visited Ukraine last year. There was a hackathon in Kyiv that we organized, and he came to visit. It was his first visit to Ukraine. And we had a lot of conversations about DAO's governance with him when he was here. And then he kind of sent me a list of questions that he had, like follow-up questions after we talked. And I replied to him. And then I was kind of shocked, but not shocked because he's very smart, right? I was shocked to see how clearly he understood what it was that I was trying to communicate to him. So yeah, it's a really good paper on the subject. But in terms of like other things that we've been doing in our community, we've separated or broken down the community into smaller groups, and this according to like their skill sets and their preferences. And it's fluid; it's not like strict. So one person can be multiple groups. But something that I've seen DAOs have issues with too is that everybody, if you have the whole community make decisions on a bunch of different things, there is going to be people voting who don't necessarily have the skill set or the experience, to be making informed decisions about it, and that also causes like quite a lot of friction sometimes in many communities. And so this problem we've just solved by allocating people and their areas of responsibility according to their preferences. And so that's helped us a lot. And there is also a book that was recommended to me by Vitalik's dad, Dima. It's called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. I think I've dropped it in the comments too. But basically, it's the single most important book that I've read on kind of coordination, human coordination, and kind of teamwork, because the advice that's given in this book is honestly invaluable, and it talks a lot about how to motivate a team and how to create a healthy team. And the bottom line of the book is that basically the most important thing in a community, or actually in any project, it doesn't matter if it's a DAO or if it's a business, if it's an NGO, it does makes no difference whatsoever. The most important thing that you need to aspire to have a long-lasting impact is organizational health. And organizational health basically means minimum confusion as to why and what people are doing together, minimum politics, as in internal politics, right? So like arbitrary decisions, lack of clarity, and so on. And it also highlights that, first of all, you should not avoid conflicts within your community as long as its members trust each other, and also that it takes time to build a culture, and it takes time to build an organization that's healthy. And because I feel like that is something that a lot of people kind of turn the blind eye on. So yeah.
Yeah. I see Deepa raising her hand, but also like I had a question for all you guys, especially of course for Deepa and then and for Leona. If you're building a sustainable DAO, and of course culture is a big part, and expertise and knowledge is a big part, right? So what do you lean into more? Do you lean more on people who get the culture, or do you lean more on people who actually have that expertise, or do you try to kind of combine it too? I know that's kind of a cop out. So if you had a choice, which one would you lean on? And Deepa, go ahead. I interrupted you.
I would say just to complete what Alona said, Vitalik even put out one tweet once which said that you need a community first before you start governing it. And I know a lot of DAOs, or the DAO maximalist will say, oh, in order to be a DAO, you need to have governance tokens, right? Like they're like, if you don't have that on chain, then you're not DAO. But DAOs have beginning. There is a starting point of a DAO. And it is very much like, these organizations that are coming on the internet to get work done. And generally, it's somebody who initiates it, right? And, somebody will tweet out something and others will come together. And then the community comes together. And then the second logical step, as Vitalik's tweet said, is to figure out what, first set the community, set the culture, set the values, then figure out the governance part of it. But the DAO maximalist would be like, oh, you're starting a DAO, have the governance token at the get-go. So that's not the first principle, design philosophy. It should be, what are the logical steps you need to take in order to decentralize, right? And if you look at open source software, like it generally, a couple people coming together, releasing their code, and then people come and contribute, right? And every GitHub commit is like a soul-bound token, literally. It's on a centralized server, though. But every it gets hashed, but it is like, and those contributors can take it and add it to their profile and say they've contributed to this code base, they've contributed to like 10 other code base, and that helps them build their own reputation within the software community, right? They gain power through that. So that was to just complete that thought. But in terms of what should come first, when you're starting a DAO, should it be expertise or should it be culture? It should be culture, because the initial founders are going to set the culture. They're going to define the values, and that values is going to define the culture. And the culture is what's going to bring the experts in, because when you join a DAO, you join a cause, right? And you join people. You join like-minded people, like people who are at the same wavelength. So I would never join a DAO. Like even if I'm an expert in something and they say, hey, come join us, I'm like, I would want to observe your culture first. Am I culturally fit to join your DAO? And with DAOs, the beauty is that everything plays out in a Discord or a Telegram group. And so you can just be part of that, sit around, just observe the culture, and then take a call whether you want to join or not. But culture is what draws experts.
Excellent, very interesting answer, very clear answer. Of course, do we have any opposite side, any DAO Maximus here? If not, I'll play the role just for the sake of argument. But maybe, I don't know, Ben, if you're on that side, or if anyone else, I would love to hear kind of some pushback on everything. Kind of, as they say, an argument, you get to truth or some sort of clarity. So if anyone has the opposite viewpoint, we'd love to hear it.
I mean, I'm very curious what your arguments are going to be if you play devil's advocate, so bring them on.
So I mean,
No, I was just going to say the same thing. I was curious to hear your devil's advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to play devil's advocate in here. I mean, to me, it's pretty straightforward, right? Because as the group coming together for something with any sort of culture, I think that doesn't necessarily need a DAO, right? That can be done on, a Telegram chat, on Discord, whatever, right? And then the governance setup, the token, or the proposal circuit, the quorums, the voting length, the delegates, the validators, whatever, right? All of those different elements, I think they set up the rules to play by in order for the group, as it grows especially, to define their culture, to change it if they need to arrive at appointing people and governing treasury, doing all those other things in a way that makes sense for them. I think the process itself is relatively agnostic in the sense of they're mathematical rules. They don't care about your culture and politics in a way, in terms of, you set the quorum, you set the number of delegates, and then you can change it as a DAO. But someone has to do it at some point, right? And if you wait until everything is ironed out, the culture is ironed out, everything's ironed out within the DAO, and then change the rules, I think it's going to be a bit harder, because the rules you set up initially, if not carefully thought through, may not be very good in terms of, actually having the power in the hands of the people rather than the team, for example, or in terms of preventing malicious attacks, etc. So I would distinguish the tools as a technical setup that's integral to the DAO as a structure, rather than the content and the spirit of the DAO, which I think is not necessarily bound to a DAO as a structure and could precede it as a devil's advocate position. Not necessarily, no, just quick disclaimer.
I think we also need to consider what kind of DAO it is. If the DAO's sole purpose is to allocate funds, like, okay, we pulled in this money, the DAO, if we take that as a use case, the purpose was to just invest in startups. And so a bunch of people pulled in money, and they could govern, or they could propose how those funds should be allocated. So if the DAO's purpose is purely to just dispense funds around specific areas, then obviously merit is not needed, in the sense that anybody who's pulled in money gets a governance token, which can be non-tradable, or I don't know what the structure would look like, but then they could use that token to just allocate funds, right? Collectively decide where the money should go. But if the purpose is different, and the ones that we mostly study are impact DAOs, DAOs around social and financial inclusion, climate change, even studying decentralized science DAOs and network state DAOs. And those behave slightly differently, but, just from a past study of climate and social DAOs, their purpose is very different, right? Then most of them, are not doing grant making. So, and they're just organizing on the internet to get other things done, and so they need to look at how to decentralize from their point of view. So I think it depends from the DAO activity. What is the DAO set up for? Like, we set up a DAO to write a book, and it was a time-bound DAO. Like, we wanted to write a book in 6 months, so we needed to continuously keep moving forward. And I was the only full-time contributor. Everybody else was part-time. But if I reflect back, and I want to, give Soul1 tokens, because they didn't exist at that point of time, to the ones who contributed significantly, to the DAO, in writing this book. So I think it depends on the nature of the DAO, what activity they needs to undertake. And DAOs could be formed for just completing a task, or it could be just, running an organization like Gitcoin DAO, which is an organization, a tech company as a DAO. And so it can totally differ.
Well, I see both Ben and Lena having their hands up. Guys, just jump in. Obviously, with respect, but jump in whenever. No, we need to raise the hand. You guys are part of this.
I just wanted to add that I totally agree with Deepa, because if I were to choose between as to what's more important, culture or having super skilled, super intelligent people on the team, my experience has shown that you can have very smart people, you can have very knowledgeable people. If they are not a good culture fit, that's not going to work. And if there is no teamwork, if people don't trust each other in particular, it's not going to work. And so this is the most important thing. It's not like that in that quote that I attached to. It's not finance, it's not strategy, and it's not even technology. It's teamwork that makes the ultimate competitive advantage in any space. And so in my experience, that's been by far the most important thing.
And Ben, feel free to jump in as well, of course.
Yeah, I mean, really juicy prompt. And I very much agree with what was said by both of the last speakers. It reminds me of this quote that I'm probably misquoting from Gandhi. Everybody's looking for a system so perfect, nobody has to be any good inside of it. The idea being that, it really still comes down to human behavior at the end of the day, no matter how well we structure an entity or create a set of policies or bylaws or a constitution, whatever it might be. To me, the analog that I see with DAOs that put a lot of time and energy into setting up structure before they kind of get to work on their mission, it reminds me of nonprofits, who spend a lot of time writing mission and value statements and putting together their bylaws instead of just kind of getting to work on whatever it is that the group was interested in working on. And I've seen a lot of affinity groups, which are basically just like structureless organizations, just groups of people working on something that were very successful at their mission, just simply because it was a group of people that vibed together, that shared a common purpose, that were able to communicate and didn't need a bunch of overarching rules to sort of help them with their mission. Of course, a lot really depends on what it is you're trying to do. And, people need resources to be able to actually achieve their goals if your goals are quite large. Although, it's pretty amazing what people can do, when they are sort of forced to be innovative, even when they don't have those resources. I think if we're being honest, a lot of DAOs really do launch governance tokens because they're hoping that they will have monetary value and will be useful to financing their work in some way. And I don't think that's a bad thing necessarily. I'm a big fan of local currencies, and approaches to, sort of using tokenomics to, create the possibility for things to, exist that may not have otherwise when others see value in it and want to exchange them. But it does create some interesting and sometimes problematic dynamics when, the intention of a token is both to, sort of be a financial instrument and also to be a voting instrument. I think if we sort of unpack that and look at it more carefully, like might be not the best approach to sort of tokenomic design, and maybe we need to find better ways of going about launching tokens that don't create concerns with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and find ways to sort of move forward that, we can be more transparent and clear and real about sort of why these tokens exist in the first place.
Great. So as we see aside, obviously, because sometimes it feels like there's nothing we can do to please them, which it is important, obviously, but nothing we can solve here with the USDC. Aside from that, let's talk about separating tokens from voting, right? So one obvious way is meritocracy, right? Is using experts and trusting experts in actually making decisions on things they know something about. And I don't want to mention that I think, if I understood correctly, that it's done in Ukraine DAO by letting people self-identify. Have you seen other methods? Do you recommend any methods? Do you see a way for DAOs to really be these new forms where meritocracy actually is valuable, both in terms of respect it gets and getting paid for it, and of course for others, token holders who trust the experts, who delegate to them and otherwise trust them to benefit from that as well?
Cabin DAO is a great example of using skin in the game soulbound token methodology. Like in order to be, it's a network of remote places. Think of it as an Airbnb, but the locations are highly remote and beautiful places with fast internet connection, designed for digital nomads, so people can just go live there for extended period of time and have an immersive experience. But in order to be listed on Cabin, like if you want to list your property on Cabin, then you need to be a citizen first, and the way to earn your citizenship is that you need to spend time with the community first, through co-living experiences. So they do these co-living weeks where they will just identify a thing to do as a community together, and you go do that activity, and then you earn stamps. So you earn your right into the DAO, and you get dropped these Cabin tokens, which are non-tradable. And with that, you become a citizen if you get enough, whatever the threshold is. And with that citizenship, you can list properties, you can vouch people in. So it's a social vouching system. You can vouch 10 more people in who can then list their properties if they have like a beautiful farm, say on an island, and they want to list it on the network. Yeah, and so it's a completely reputation-based, merit-based system. The merits that they earn is through contribution, through spending time with the community, building trust, and then getting awarded those tokens. And then those tokens act as governance tokens. Those members can also curate the listing, so on Airbnb, like how the listings are, like people put reviews, but here the community, who have the tokens can curate the listings, and they can show they can order the list of the properties they want to show on the website. So it's a totally different approach to building trust in a decentralized fashion, because they're not asking for KYC or anything, right? And so the only way to earn that trust is to spend time on these soulbound tokens. They're using Autospace and Unlock protocol to award these tokens, and then with these tokens, you can vouch other members in and stuff like that.
That's a very cool example.
Yeah, I see a lot of potential in soulbound tokens, and as Deepa said, like from the very beginning, we didn't consider anything, like we wanted to avoid any speculation. So we didn't want for people to be trading their governance rights, essentially, especially because of the specifics of our purpose, right? So our community is deeply political. I think maybe unlike many other Web3 projects, they cannot by definition, we cannot be open to everyone, right? Because of the situation that Ukraine finds itself in. And we also wanted to avoid any possibility of the governance getting hijacked. And we are also in a unique position, not in a good way, to be a subject of a lot of info attacks by Russia, unfortunately. And so the way we got around it is just by thinking, well, if we don't have a token, we don't have a problem, right? And it's worked so far. But something that I can see us doing in the future is using some of our own tokens. And I've also pinned in the nest the paper, the DeXe paper about it, because it's not the very fact of the token, of the use of the tokens, that's the issue, right? Is the way people use them. And so if you can earn credentials and you can earn recognition on chain, but you just can't trade it, that's a great solution actually that we'll explore in the future. But for now, we've mostly been using Discord roles.
I see we have a request here from Basil G, so I'm gonna bring him in. But in the meantime, if anybody else wants to respond to it, I'm processing this. This is actually maybe after Basil. I do have a question for Alona. I wonder, since you mentioned it, and from what I heard, I think from Deepa actually, is that almost nobody draws a salary at Ukraine DAO, right? And it's understandable, of course, everyone's trying to help Ukraine volunteer, but if it becomes a longer purpose DAO, time-wise, right, it endures for years and does various projects helping Ukraine, and also as a model for other nonprofit DAOs, do you see Ukraine DAO basically at some point giving salaries to people so they can professionally manage a nonprofit, showcasing their skill, of course, of raising a lot of money, directing it properly to places where they're needed. Of course, being born in Ukraine, I hugely appreciate what you guys are doing. This is more of a sustainability question and providing a living wage question for nonprofit DAOs in general, and for whatever experience you can speak to from yourself. Obviously, haven't found a big DAO that's doing something amazing.
Something that I see us doing in the close future is using the DAO as a service model, right? So we do a lot of work that, first of all, is deeply needed in the info space. We produce, for example, lots and lots of translations of like really high quality translations that are done quickly and efficiently, and so far we've been doing them for our partners like Come Back Alive, which is the Ukraine's leading charity supporting the RU, and we also do them like on a daily basis, smaller translations in order to communicate to the Western or at least to English-speaking audience about things about Ukraine, about our culture, and so on. And so something that I see, and that's like, it's quite a significant chunk of our work, actually, this type of work. And I believe this is kind of stuff that should be paid, and people should be charging for it, right? And for now, I'm really encouraging our community for setting up Buy Me a Coffee pages, right? So that at least people will know them in the community, and they tend to become, the more they participate, the more engaged they are, they tend to, develop their own following. So at least having a Buy Me a Coffee page where people can support them, and people monetize it within community in different ways. To some people, the community members donate because they take cool pictures. Somebody does it through translations, somebody through fact-checking information, and so on. And so I would love for our community to become a place where funds, NGOs, and news agencies, journalists, and so on, come to the community and say, guys, we need to have this work done. We need to get this done, and people get paid through that. This, and also having an operational fund set up separately that people can donate as well. It will probably be maybe, I don't know, less. It's something that, in my experience, was like Ukrainian, looking at Ukrainian charities, it's something that people donate towards less, but that's absolutely normal because, like in Ukraine, all the attention right now is focused on supporting the army. But yeah, I see it based on people providing the service, and people in our community, they're already here, right? They already help them. But it's the issue, like something that we need to work through is how to join the clients, right? And what's the fair distribution model, and how should people get paid out of like common pots that everybody shares, or is it easier for everyone to have like their own, I don't know, buy me a coffee or Patreon and so on? What's the model that works best? So that is something that I would be curious to hear about more myself.
Yeah, I like the operational fund idea. I want to ask Ben later about it, but I see Dimitri's here, and I know he's a founder, and it'd be very interesting to see what he has to say. And then Basil, at some point, I would love to hear from you as well.
Hey, hello everyone. Nice to be here. Yes, I just not out to make a request for the word right now, but I'm very interested on what we are guys discussing right now. So I know that the topic is about the meritocracy and the motivation, and I see that Basil already put 3 times the hand. So let's give him the word first, and I will continue on that topic. Okay.
Totally, Basil, go ahead. Love to hear.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. I really want to thank the team for this great conversation. It's really encouraging. I've learned a lot today. The idea of DAO is to actually unite and also bring equity in the process of governance. What this actually means is that now, when you are operating in it as a DAO, it means that every member of that particular team, they have the power. They have equal power with there is no hierarchy. So everyone have the power to contribute to the success of that particular project. So I love what DeXe is doing by bringing this idea of bringing people together in order to knowledge cannot be enough when one person is contributing, but when a group of people come together to bring out their knowledge from their different perspective of view, this will actually help a team to realize their goal and also achieve their aim in the project. So this will like in Africa, coming together as Web3 lovers, it helps a lot in actually uniting the people and also spreading the knowledge of that particular project to the grassroots. What I mean by the grassroots, some people, most in this part of Africa, are still doubting the fact that there is another currency that is not used as a traditional currency, and they don't believe that can actually be used as to purchase in the market. But so when you are trying to, with this idea of DAO, people speaking their mind to the people at the grassroots, trying to enlighten them on what this Web3 is all about, that people can actually come together, not win until they see themselves, but from different countries, from different places, to come together to bring their idea to build a project and in order to achieve their goals, and also I make sure that all the members have equal control and equal power in contributing to the success of that project. In doubt, it actually has to do with you cannot make decision alone as a person in DAO, but it has to be a contributive effort where people comes in, let's vote for this particular thing. This is what we want. Okay, this is what we want. Okay, let's go on voting. By voting, this will actually decide, just like operating as a national assembly or international assembly, where people comes in, oh, this is what we want, and let's go for this. Let's go for this. Okay, let's go into the voting. People vote through this snapshot, they will now come to decide that this will actually happen. This one will actually be. So I love the idea of DeXe of bringing this DAO, making it to be a project of everyone. I really want to thank the team for this opportunity and for this great opportunity to listen to everyone speak. I learned a lot from a lot of people. I've learned a lot from different speakers. I really want to appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bezos. I appreciate you as well. And there's at least a couple of questions, I think, from what you said that are really important that I'm kind of getting at is, well, first of all, is it really equal power and equal voting for everyone in the DAO? Nor should it, or whether even there should be equal power. So, talking about DeXe, we're all about experts in meritocracy, right? Where people who have certain expertise and have proven that they have certain expertise, that the DAO itself has selected them as someone having expertise and delegated tokens to them specifically, right? They have higher voting power because, first of all, they have this expertise, and second of all, the DAO itself, the members themselves, trusted them that they have this expertise and delegated to them because of their expertise and gave them this extra power in recognizing that their expertise is better for the DAO, and therefore they should have this extra power, right? So it's extra power for some people, but not randomly because they're whales or something, or because they're Vitalik or whatever, right? But because they have proven expertise that the DAO itself is recognized and that people recognize the benefit of this expertise, right? And this is, switching over to the meritocracy side of this panel's topic. I think this is very powerful personally, and feel free to disagree with me, of course. This is what makes it fun. And then the second part I forgot, but right. So the second part is you mentioned Africa, right? It gives so many opportunities to people in Africa, in Asia, in Europe, in North America, South America, Australia, everywhere, a chance to participate. But let's be realistic, not everybody can volunteer. Not everybody has the financial comfort and the time, plenty of time to just contribute to any DAO on their leisure. And people need to feed their families, right? So the second part of this is, can we make, as DAOs, can we make real jobs for people doing things that may not even pay well right now in the Web 2 world, in the traditional industrial, whatever you want to call it, world, in terms of maybe we can create 1 million jobs of people who do nonprofit work, right? Or 10 million or 1 billion jobs of people who go in areas where there's war, in areas where there's poverty, in areas where there's natural disasters, in areas where there's medical issues, et cetera, and create better ways to help them, better ways to spend donations and government grants to help them, but also the people themselves making money on that, right? And this is just one of many examples. I know Ben, I'm sure, has an interesting perspective on that, being, Gitcoin grants and your grants round just so big. Of course, I'm sure deep with us about Dimitri as a founder. Did not forget about you. Feel free to chime in whenever as well.
Yeah, I just want to add to the fact that we understand, DAO is like a global economy, right? People from any part of the world can participate in a DAO. You're not limited by borders because it's on the internet, and most DAOs put out bounties. Like if they have tasks to be completed, and if they have funds, then they put out bounties, right? But and then people can pick up these bounties from anywhere and complete those tasks. And obviously, there's a system in place to review the work before funds are released and all that stuff. But then I'm always like, this is a conflict that I have, and I've been thinking about it, is that when you have transactional relationships with contributors, then do you want to decentralize with those contributors? Like, would you want to then allocate them voting rights? Because the relationships are purely transactional, right? It's they could just do one task and not come back, or if there could be a system in place that says, okay, if you're consistently completing tasks, the way it's to be done, then you earn the right to vote. So that's something up for like exploration, like how you should decentralize in that fashion if the relationships are transactional.
Guys, feel free to jump in. Ben, basically, I don't know. No one need to raise hands, just jump in.
I just wanted to chime in on this. There is a really good quote that I heard in one of the TED Talks that I listened about on leadership. And it's basically the idea was that good leaders inspire people to believe in the leaders, right? So you inspire the faith of other people in yourself, whereas great leaders inspire people to believe in themselves. And so something that I've seen a lot, and it was a surprising thing for me, is that the struggle, like within our community, for example, is not in like I don't know, equally distributing the decision making and accountability. It's like it's been or like removing, decentralizing it from one person, right? It's been in encouraging people to lead, to want to lead things, right? And to take accountability for the project that take on and to become a leader themselves. You know, it was like a surprising thing for me to see that a lot of people actually do not want to make decisions. You know, and it's a something that you need to overcome, or you need to help people overcome this, because a lot of people unfortunately literally do not believe in themselves. But once you start fostering this belief within them, and once you start kind of pushing everyone forward and telling them that actually you can do it, you know, and you can actually do a lot more than you think of yourself, that's when stuff starts to happen, because then people start developing their own personal brand, maybe their own community in that, right? And it's a great thing. And so, yeah, I think it's like such a big part of it. It's just not just like making sure that everybody gets a fair say, but to making sure that everybody wants to have a say in the first place, if that makes sense.
Hello. Yeah, I've heard one of the speakers said transparency in transaction, but I believe that in DAO it is what you actually put in that you will actually have as a output. You know, everyone is expected to contribute to the project, and when you contribute, whatever the project has been able to yield, like as a profit or as an interest, will be shared equally according to uh, the efforts and how you actually contributed to the project. So I think it will not be as the I invested one $10,000 in a project, and the other person invested $5,000 in the project. So everything will be done with transparency, and the highest sticker will have to go with the highest pay. So transparency is all about what we are talking about in DAO. So everyone has to be treated equal, but you are treated equal with your input. Whatever you put in will be, because it is one a dramatic expression that says cabbage in, cabbage out. What you put in is what you have. You have as an outcome of what you do. So I think DAO actually prioritize that to make it compulsory that transparency has to be the order of the day, making everyone to see that this thing is open. No, nothing like hidden fees or whatever. Everyone have been treated equal. So I really want to say that DAO is a real deal, and I love the idea of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Basil. Yeah, I think we're definitely never arguing about whether, you know, people get rewarded for what they put in, of course, right? It's more of a structure of it. So, by the way, I see Fizzle here. Hey, how you doing, man? Wait, where'd you go? Just saw you a second ago. Ben, I haven't heard from you in a bit. I'm sure from the Gitcoin perspective, you have interesting ways of looking at whether, you know, it should be salaries or it should be grants or some other way of doing it in terms of rewarding people for the contribution.
Yeah, I mean, super juicy question. And I was really interested to hear other people's perspectives. Like, definitely Gitcoin is kind of a combination of a tech company and, you know, and a decentralized decision-making entity like a DAO. And I mean, I think it would be very difficult for us to have a number of developers working on a number of different projects simultaneously and coordinating across work streams if we weren't a salaried entity. That being said, like how we make decisions about the salaries, how we make decisions about sort of transparency and accountability and all that good stuff, is ever evolving. We do have stewards that are, elected through by token holders, and we're increasingly looking at ways to sort of, go beyond just the delegation of votes to, to the implementation of things like quadratic voting. And honestly, a lot of our decision making happens, similar to what I was talking about as kind of rule bound tokens, but really just using badges inside of Discord, honestly, to just kind of determine who is in different discussion threads, and sort of access is a form of power and decision making in and of itself. A lot of what we do does not actually come down to a vote. It's usually more of kind of a holacracy approach or something along those lines, where we really just talk about what's kind of safe to try and look for where there isn't disagreement, as opposed to sort of forcing everything to go to formalized voting. But in terms of rewarding contributors, we now have this idea of Gitcoin community proposals, which is kind of a way to fund things outside of our grants round or outside of our sort of more sort of formal salaried structure, which I think is a really interesting approach that still is evolving as well. But, we have seen some good things get funded already through our Gitcoin community proposals, which basically just is a post in the governance forums followed by a snapshot vote. But, I think, that model can open the door to the kind of innovation that comes through less structure, more kind of just invitation for opportunities to sort of bubble up. Within the Gitcoin grants program itself, to me, this is where things get really exciting and juicy. It's this kind of community-driven model of like us just raising funds for matching fund partners in the community, really determining how those funds get put in people's hands. And especially when you take a step back and look at it over multiple grants rounds, and you see the sort of ebb and flow of projects that find new collaboration, new coordination opportunities, a new co-founder, a new developer, some code to play with, folks that you have common cause with to work on, fixing the same problems together. I think we almost put too much emphasis just on the sort of monetary rewards, because a lot of those, sort of social connections are very valuable, and really have real world implications in terms of the outcomes. And, even just kind of the creation of those Schelling points for people to come together, to sort of find those that, have that merit and that motivation, is critically important. And, I think one of the questions that we all need to wrestle with is kind of this idea of like, who watches the watchman, who determines what has the merit, what filters are we looking at those questions through, what biases do we bring to the table about what actually has enough merit to be supported or not. And, and how do we, in our workplaces, whether they be DAOs or otherwise, ensure that there's enough psychological safety and enough sort of room for people to come forward with opposing views without worries that might affect their economic bottom line. So yeah, lots to unpack there, but long story short is it's a work in progress and an interesting experiment to be the midst of.
The economic bottom line is one of the things I'm after here, right? To try to figure out. So there's certain payments, right? There's grants, etc. But can DAOs provide actual living to people? Or better yet, let's make this really controversial. Is there job stability in DAOs? Is there job stability for validators, for experts, for others, doing various roles in DAOs and getting paid for it? Is this impossible, or are we at the age where that such a thing doesn't exist anymore, and you really just gotta hustle and prove yourself and build those relationships and build a reputation, and kind of forget about such a thing as job security or income security as a thing?
Many DAOs have full-time employees. They just don't call them full-time employees. They are called full-time contributors. So for instance, Gitcoin, as Ben said, that they have actual technology to build, and so they need to hire professionals for that, and so they're salaried. And Vita DAO, I recently interviewed them, and they have people on the payroll. Similarly, Cabin DAO has the core team. They call it the core team, which is 9 to 5. They're contractual people, so they get paid. So when DAOs are, I think the initial DAO phase that we saw was, they mostly fundraised in 2021, and they were mostly driven by proposals and bounty work. But now that the companies are getting formed on the internet and there's real work to be done, and if they have good enough treasury or have a sustainable business model and built, they will be hiring people, they will be paying. It's just, we are very early, and this is, more DAOs are now figuring out their business model. Like, for instance, Cabin has NFT subscriptions that powers their business, things like that. So as they figure out, they'll be able to hire people full time,
Yeah, I mean, I would actually flip the question on its head and say, does anybody have job security outside of Web3 either these days? As the economy, shifts, as we move towards new technology that eliminates, the need for certain jobs, I think we see less and less job security recently. And, whether you work in a more traditional tech job or, in Web3 or many other sectors, like, I think the idea of job security, where you worked at the same company for your entire life, is for many people a thing of the past. That being said, I think there's definitely the possibility for DAOs to have job security. I mean, I've worked at Gitcoin now for 1.5 years, which feels like 15 years in Web3 land. It's definitely been a kind of a wild ride at times. A lot has changed. There's been a lot of restructuring, but I can't say that it's that dissimilar to experiences that I've had, even in nonprofits or in in bigger companies. I think job security is a difficult thing. What I worry about actually is with DAOs, whether they have the sort of infrastructure in place, as Deepa sort of pointed out, like, we call it contributors instead of employees. And, that means a lot less kind of rights, job protection, kind of all the things that come along with being an employee. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time, when there are, issues in a workplace, that would have been dealt with through, say, like a labor relations board or some other mechanism like that. I think we're going to have to find solutions to those kinds of problems if we're going to continue to attract high quality, talented people who want to be a part of something and, still need to be able to put food on the table and, pay for a mortgage or whatever it might be. But, definitely, like Deepa said, if the money's out there, like if you've, had a successful token event or you have a business model, there's definitely places where people are earning a decent living and, quite happily working in DAOs, and with help of entities like Opolis or others, actually able to file their taxes and all that good stuff. But it's definitely an unusual work environment compared to the traditional world, that's for sure.
I was literally just about to give a shout out to Opolis and my friend Josh there. I've been following it since very early on. Yeah, definitely them and others. Anybody else wants to chime in on this? I have more questions, just don't want to interfere too much with the flow. Okay, on to the next question then. So I have one that I prepared. There's kind of a what if scenario, just to kind of play around with it and see how far we can take motivation and meritocracy, especially motivation. So let's say right now, a lot of people hold governance tokens and they vote, and sometimes it's just to get some airdrop tokens and maybe don't read the proposal that much. What if, as a hypothetical, everyone voting would be putting a certain amount of money on the line of their own tokens, right? Maybe a tiny amount, maybe, a little bit more significant amount, but some sort of amount. And if that proposal doesn't pass, then those who voted yes for it have to pay for it out of their own money. This is obviously not something DeXe is implementing or anyone else I heard is implementing. It's just me conjuring up a fantasy just to play around with the idea of motivation. And then feel free to use this to come up with much better provocative ideas for motivation, for testing motivation and improving as well.
I could jump in there. I mean, definitely there's some interesting sort of staking protocols where you stake some tokens against an idea, and then if that idea succeeds or fails, it's got implications for your stake. We not the same idea, but we are kind of experimenting with some interesting things around staking on identity, where to get Gitcoin passport stamps, you're basically staking some of your tokens to say that somebody actually is who they say they are. I think that is an interesting model in and of itself, because it does put some additional responsibility and some skin in the game, so to speak. Really, the challenge with that model, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious, but just for the sake of saying it, is that it's just not a level playing field in terms of the tokens that people actually have available to stake. So it just would make it very difficult for folks with less resources at their disposal to sort of meaningfully participate. That being said, I do think there's some opportunity to explore sort of non-monetary tokens that have other sort of forms of intrinsic value that people could use to sort of show their conviction behind a certain idea. Definitely different forms of conviction voting are interesting to me, or sometimes called dotmocracy. Like when you've got a bunch of ideas up on the board and you've got a limited number of stickers that you can put on the ideas that you like, and you can show your level of conviction by the number of stickers that you give to a particular thing. I don't know if anybody's done this exercise. But, I do think having ways of kind of measuring people's level of support for something and having real world implications of your vote is a pretty ripe and interesting area to explore. But how we deal with the sort of inequalities that underlie it, to me, is kind of the $1 million question in the midst of that.
Yeah, I really like Ben's idea of staking for identity, because if you want to establish trust in a decentralized fashion, not using any centralized ways of, link to your LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever to establish identity, I think this decentralized way of, staking and vouching for that person by staking your token is a really great way. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing about this kind of a staking approach to identity, and I feel like it's a really good one. Like, it has a lot of potential, and maybe it could be a token that is different from the tradable token, right? It could be granted to the first members or the ones that you've already established trust with. And then those members, like for instance, Cabin, their citizens can then, they're not staking right now, but they can vouch in people, 10 new people into the network. And this could be used through staking tokens, which are different from the trading ones.
Speaking of reputation, I know obviously with Gitcoin Passport and other IDs and just general protocols that like to reward the active members of other DAOs and other protocols, right? But looking at the other side, is there does that put at a bit of a disadvantage people who are just active in a very particular DAO, or maybe particular types of DAO? Do we have, or maybe should we have, more siloed kind of reputations or some other ways of proving your worth that's not based on how much activity you have across the entire field? Or maybe we just should have activity across the entire field. There's no issue there. I'm just curious to tackle that aspect a little bit.
I mean, I think what you're talking about is basically the kind of core question that our Passport team is constantly wrestling with and adjusting in terms of how we, all the different options that people might have as to how to verify their identity. So staking on identity is just one Passport stamp right now. And there's a whole bunch of other ones, and they range from legacy web things like connecting your LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook accounts, and your Gmail and whatever else, to at the other end of the spectrum, just like your on-chain activity or, many Web3 protocols that, have some role in identity staking, whether it's holding NFTs or POAPs or using Bright ID or Civics or some other protocol like that. And to me, it's a really interesting thing to look at especially when we start imagining what people can do with a tool like Gitcoin Passport that they customize for the needs of their own community. We're setting up the sort of scoring infrastructure in the way that makes the most sense for the Gitcoin grants rounds. And even between our different grants rounds, we're seeing that it might make sense to give more value to certain stamps than others in a particular sub-community, for any number of different reasons. Like you might have more Web3 native people in one round and far less in another one, for example. Or you'd have people that are very active using a certain set of tools that would be a great indicator that these are unique individuals for that particular grants round or for that particular community, but might not be as relevant to sort of focus on other tools and the weight that they would have. So, I mean, I definitely don't think it's a one-size-fits-all solution. I think the idea is just kind of having a relatively robust protocol that you can build a wide range of approaches on top of and sort of experiment with and figure out what works best. And we're kind of constantly adjusting that between grants rounds, which is an interesting thing to see happening in real time. And I'm always curious to hear about people's experiences. If your experience is good or challenging with Gitcoin Passport or any other part of the Gitcoin Grants program, please, don't hesitate to reach out and let us know, because we're always kind of iterating on that process.
Kind of building off on that, just to hit a hot topic right now, AI. There's more and more use of AI in determining people's status and usefulness and just rankings and all those kind of things. And I'm not against it by any means, but I'm curious from all your perspectives, can we trust AI to determine someone's usefulness? Or are we getting to dystopia, or it's just a very good, useful tool? And then if so, what kind of metrics, what kind of qualities would you train the AI to focus on? Both good and bad ones, right? Like what to look out for and what to also appreciate. If we're training the AI model, and if we should, what should it look for? And by the way, I see Ethereum used there for a while. I forgot to give you a shout out earlier. Shout out to you. Thank you for being our little listener. You're awesome.
I think AIs are going to play a big role in DAOs because they can simplify so much. Right now, the way the DAOs are, like people are constantly, new people are joining, and there are like everybody, like sometimes, the whole onboarding, like everything can be powered by AI in the future. Like you can have a LLM for your Discord, who can summarize the top discussions, because sometimes people feel overwhelmed, right? Like they come in after 10 days and they're like, oh my God, so much has happened in the Discord. I don't know where to start from. So, I mean, the LLMs can play a really big role there, even for governance, like reading proposals and like it's a voluntary job, right? Nobody's getting paid for it at this point of time. And if we want everybody to vote on everything, like one person, one vote, no delegate voting, like we want like proof of humanity had that model, like everybody votes on everything. And then you don't have time to read. So LLMs can play a big role in terms of just summarizing, highlighting, providing an objective view of what's going on. So I feel like in the future, a lot of DAOs will be powered by AI. There's already Nani, which is by Lex DAO. We had a great Twitter Spaces with them. They've trained Nani AI model on their Lex DAO Discord. So, people come to Lex DAO to ask various kinds of legal questions. I've been contributing here. What is my, legal implications and all that stuff. So they've trained the model on their Discord, and you can start talking to Nani. It's your private lawyer, crypto lawyer. You don't have to do an internet search and you want to try to find a crypto lawyer. And sometimes you don't want to discuss your questions publicly. So this is your AI bot. You can start chatting and asking questions. They're going to train the model further. They're going to even go to Reddit, where a lot of such discussions around Bankless DAO and other DAOs have taken place. So they're going to train the model better. The Nani AI can talk to your wallet and warn you about things like, or even answer a question like how to bridge, like as it gets more sophisticated, because bridging is going to become such a big part of, since everything is moving to L2 and, new people keep coming in. It's not something that they're fluent in, it's such a new thing to do. So they can ask all these questions like how to go about things. So I feel AI is going to play such a big role in DAOs and just like a self-help thing, like how to do this with blockchain and Web3.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say that a lot really depends on sort of what you're reverse engineering towards. Like if you ask an AI, just to sort of judge merit based on profitability versus kind of other metrics, I think you get very different results. So, I think it's, again, just kind of a question of like what inherent biases are we programming into into an AI model, and being really, really clear about where we're trying to go. Because if by sort of focusing very much on sort of one set of objectives, you might be inadvertently sort of shutting the door to other objectives that may also be important to you. You just may not have sort of thought about it. My personal concern about AI models is really just if we lose track of where and how the decisions are being made. I think it's critical that like AI also tell us kind of how it made the recommendations that it made, or why it made the recommendations that it made. There's actually this interesting new emerging field of AIs that interpret other AI. So you're actually trying to learn why an AI model actually made a recommendation that it made. And my 2 cents is that I think it's best used as not a final decision-making tool necessarily, but more like a guide or an additional set of tools in your toolkit, but not something to kind of turn all the decision-making authority over to, for something that's got critically important outcomes associated with it. That might be the case in the not too distant future where there's AI models that we, really trust and have trained in a way that we feel like the outcomes are fair and are not, in taking our inherent biases and sort of ramping them up to 1,000 basically. But I definitely see some potential dangers if we're not careful. And frankly, I think that's true whether it's AI making those decisions or just a group of humans. We just need to be sort of thoughtful about what biases we bring to the table.
So speaking of humans and their biases, this might be the last question because we're way over time, but this is just too much fun. Can humans, if presented with, so for example, right, people investing into anything want to make profit of some sort to some extent, they do care about it. And of course, the DAO needs to optimize for effectiveness, for cutting costs, etc. On the other hand, of course, people need to get paid, and hopefully the idea of DAOs in part is to distribute the wealth in a more equitable way and get more people paid for their contributions. But let's say we have this hypothetical test of telling people you could make 5x in your tokens right now, in the week, whatever, right? Or you can get 20 people paid a living wage in this DAO, but you're going to make maybe 10% on your tokens over the whole course of the year, or maybe, come out even. Do you guys think that, and then you guys obviously believers in people, otherwise you wouldn't be doing impact DAOs and get grants, but still, do you think that people are in general good enough and considerate enough to and altruistic enough to kind of choose to do it for others, or we really just need to assume that people do have their own desires and needs and biases and need to design systems that don't make them make this choice? This is the DeXe way, where we kind of create systems that make it profitable for people to be altruistic and be good and to contribute to the whole and to trust experts. But aside from DeXe, right, just in a more abstract way, what do you guys think?
Now, people are biased inherently. It's very difficult to be objective. And I feel like if you train your AI for your particular governance, like just on your governance, it can help you make sense, objectively about what's going on. Otherwise, people are biased, and you can influence your delegates even before the vote is taken. Everybody, it happens in democracy too. You can lobby and you can influence the way certain things, decisions should be made or the vote should be taken. So that's the reality, even in DAOs, it's not objective. It's, there's a big role. Influence plays a big role in DAOs.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Deepa said. starting to be a broken record saying, I agree with you.
Are the worst. Yeah, seriously, just agree on everything. Which, yeah, is good, fair point. But damn, you guys are very agreeable.
I could try to disagree in some way. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the people. There's definitely some groups of people that will act altruistically given the opportunity, and others who won't. And I mean, I think it's really hard to make assumptions about large groups of people at scale and sort of how they will act. So much depends on, kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs approach, like, how much of people's needs have been met already in this circumstance. How stable is the world that they're living in? Right now, like Ukraine DAO, for example, talking about the current realities in their governance and how they have to be very careful about who they let in because of, cyber attacks and other things that are going on right now, let alone, real world violence that's happening around them. So I think so much of that question is circumstantial. It very much depends on, the group involved. But, I mean, that's kind of the beauty of trying to create incentive structures and tokenomic structures that sort of are the right fit for the right organization. And, and kind of the beauty of decentralized models being, that we don't all need to take the exact same approach. We can, have these kind of tailor-made structures and even iterate on those structures as we see kind of what's working, what isn't working, and kind of how we can move incentive structures around. But I think kind of fundamentally at the bottom of your question is kind of like, do you have more of a Hobbes or a Locke view on human nature? Like, are people like
exactly?
Yeah. And I, honestly, my views on that change pretty dramatically day to day. I try to be very optimistic and hopeful that, like, people will do the right things and will make the right kinds of decisions and be thoughtful and respectful of others. And, definitely no lack of lots of really tangible examples of that happening that, give me reason to be hopeful. And also, it doesn't take a lot of bad apples to spoil the bunch. Like, in an open space, especially in like the DAO world that we live in, and this is something I've seen in many decentralized organizations, is that, kind of the loudest voices, the kind of most, the pushiest people tend to succeed in very flat organizations because they, can sort of fill the void with their energy. And, so I do think checks and balances and sort of, groups of people that are sort of trying to maintain the values of the organization that they're setting up becomes important. But, it's an unfortunate reality that often rules are reaction to bad behavior. Like, we end up creating a structure to sort of deal with and try to avoid problems that emerge kind of organically. And it's definitely refreshing when you're in a space where, less rules are needed because everybody's on the same page to begin with, trying to achieve the same thing. So, yeah, super, super rich question. And I wish I had a more specific answer, but I don't know, maybe next time I'll play the devil's advocate more actively, try to kind of think of ways to have more disagreement, because, but appreciate your prompts though.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I'm trying to give you guys a bit of a hard time, but I love you both. You're great. And I agree with a lot of what you said. A lot. And for the Hobbes and Locke, yeah, every day that changes for me. I think what I've come to kind of consensus with myself on is that trust by verify thing, right? So treat people and try to be towards people as Locke would be, but also put in mechanisms that Hobbes would be proud of. Not to be draconian in a way that some people are doing, like Yathan, but yeah, I think in DAO and in the DeFi channel, we see a lot of that of create a community where people who really are good and want to do good are incentivized to do good by people wanting them to do good and enable them to do good, right, the Locke way, but also have the mechanisms that don't prompt people into, going through the worst of what humanity has to offer, right, by being transparent, having a reputation, and all those other things. And aligning, again, the way DeXe is doing, aligning personal incentives for gain with organizational incentives for meritocracy and a well-functioning DAO. So this is a very interesting idea, maybe for a future panel to do a hops versus lock panel of DAO. I'll keep that in mind. But for now, thank you, everyone. By the way, for those following along on Zeely, for the quest, the keyword, the magic word for today is meritocracy. Let's not forget that, because meritocracy is important to this discussion, I think, in DAO in general. Again, huge thanks to both Ben and Deepa, and also to those who came on, Alona, huge, and both very interesting to listen to. I know she left, but still, Deepa, tell her, and Will tell her, and of course, Basil asking his question. That was very interesting to hear as well. See you guys here next week. Again, huge thanks to everyone coming. This is only as good as all of you make it. So thank you for being part of this space. This is for the education of all of us and for the betterment of the DAO space in general. And that's it. I already talked too much today. So see you next week. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It was great to be here today with Ben. I'm just talking to him after a very long time on Twitter Spaces too. And thank you so much for organizing this.
Always great space. Thanks for organizing. Great to hang out with you, Deepa, and everybody else. Much love.
Bye-bye. Thank you, guys.